I was the villain in their story. One of the police officers walked over to my car window. "Ma'am, you can get out safely now. Your visitors have been informed they need to leave immediately and stay away from your property." As I stepped out of my car, Jake shouted from the sidewalk where the officer had moved them. "Mom, this is crazy. We're your family. You can't call the police on your own son." "Jake," I replied with a calmness that surprised everyone, including myself, "family doesn't threaten legal action for mental incompetence. Family doesn't break into houses without permission. Family doesn't treat their mothers like personal banks." Emma screamed from across the street, her face twisted with anger. "You owe us money, Mrs. Thompson. We have expenses you promised to help with. You can't just abandon us like this." Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward before I could respond. "Mrs. Brooks, any future communication must go through my office. And I suggest you consult with your own attorney before making any more collection threats, because my client has complete documentation of every voluntary payment she made over the past 2 years." I watched them drive away in their cars, defeated but not surrendering. I knew this wasn't over, but for the first time in this whole situation, I felt confident and protected. That night, Margaret invited me to her house for dinner. I met her daughter who was visiting from college, and I got to see firsthand what a healthy family relationship looked like. They talked respectfully to each other, asked genuine questions about each other's lives, and laughed together over shared memories. The daughter never once asked for money during the entire evening. "I wanted that kind of relationship with Jake too," I confessed to Margaret after her daughter left to study upstairs. "Maybe you'll have it someday," she replied gently. "But first, he needs to learn that you're a person who deserves respect, not just a source of income." For the first time in weeks, I went to bed feeling hopeful about my future instead of worried about their problems. The next several days were surprisingly peaceful. My security cameras showed me that Jake and Emma drove past my house multiple times each day, sometimes slowly, sometimes parking for a few minutes, but never getting out. It was like they were studying my routine, looking for the perfect moment to make their next move. Mrs. Rodriguez had told me to document every single drive-by, so I kept a detailed log with dates and times. "Their persistence will actually help our case," she had explained. "Every time they show up after being told to stay away, it strengthens our argument for a permanent restraining order." On Friday morning, I was enjoying a peaceful breakfast when my doorbell rang. The security cameras showed me a professional-looking young woman with a clipboard and an official badge. I didn't recognize her, but something about her serious expression told me this wasn't a friendly visit. "Good morning, Mrs. Sandra Thompson," she said when I opened the door. "I'm a social investigator from the Department of Aging Services. We've received a report that you may be in a vulnerable situation, and we need to conduct a wellness evaluation." My heart sank. Jake and Emma had escalated their campaign. It wasn't just private lawyers anymore. Now they had involved government agencies. "May I see your identification?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Certainly." She showed me an official ID that looked legitimate. "I'm social worker Ms. Johnson. May I come in and speak with you?" I let her in, knowing that refusing would look worse for my case. Ms. Johnson sat in my living room and pulled out a form from her folder. "Mrs. Thompson, we've received reports that you've shown dramatic changes in your financial behavior, that you've cut off contact with your family members, and that you've displayed signs of paranoia by installing excessive security measures. We were also informed that you've refused medical and psychological assistance from your loved ones." Every word had been carefully crafted to make me sound like a mentally unstable, elderly woman. I could hear Emma's influence in the phrasing. She had always been skilled at twisting words to get what she wanted. "Ms. Johnson," I said with all the dignity I could gather, "I'd like to call my attorney before answering any of your questions." "Ma'am, this isn't a legal proceeding. It's a wellness check. If you have nothing to worry about, there should be no problem talking with me." The phrase, "if you have nothing to worry about," made my blood boil. It was the same logic bullies used to justify their invasions of privacy. "I'm calling my lawyer," I said firmly. "You can wait here or schedule another appointment, but I won't answer questions without legal representation present. I called Mrs. Rodriguez, and she arrived within 15 minutes. When she saw the social worker, her expression became stern and professional. "Ms. Johnson," she said after checking the woman's credentials, "I hope you have a court order for this visit, because my client is under legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." "Sir," Ms. Johnson replied, less confident than before, "we received reports from concerned family members about this lady's mental state. It's our obligation to investigate these claims." "What family?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked sharply. "The same family that tried to pressure her into signing a power of attorney without representation. The same family that entered her home without permission and went through her private documents. The same family that excluded her from important family events while living off her financial support." Mrs. Rodriguez opened her briefcase and placed a thick folder on the table. "Here is complete documentation of the elder financial abuse my client has suffered. $15,000 extracted from her accounts over 2 years. Systematic social isolation and emotional manipulation. If anyone needs investigation here, it's not my client." Ms. Johnson reviewed the documents with growing discomfort. It was clear that the information she had received didn't match the reality she was seeing. "Mrs. Thompson," she said finally, "can you explain why you suddenly stopped providing financial support to your son?" "Because I finally realized they were exploiting me," I answered simply. "Because I understood that to them I wasn't a mother. I was a bank account with legs. Because I got tired of financing the lives of people who treated me like I was invisible." "But don't you feel it's your duty to help your family?" she asked. Question made me angry. "Ms. Johnson, my duty as a mother was to raise my son until he became an adult, to educate him, and to give him the tools to be independent. My son is 32 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Funding his adult lifestyle is not my duty, it's my choice. And I've chosen to stop," Mrs. Rodriguez added. "Ms. Johnson, would you consider it normal for a 32-year-old married man to be unable to pay his own electric bill without help from his 71-year-old mother?" Ms. Johnson didn't answer immediately. I could see her reconsidering the entire situation. "Mrs. Thompson," she asked after a pause, "do you manage your own finances independently? I can show you my bank records, my investment accounts, my tax filings. Everything is current and properly managed. Do you live independently? As you can see, I maintain my home, care for my personal needs, drive my own car, and have healthy relationships with my neighbors. Are you taking any medications?" "Only vitamins and occasional pain relievers. I have no medical conditions requiring prescription drugs," Mrs. Rodriguez added. "My client recently underwent comprehensive medical evaluations as part of our legal preparations. She's in excellent mental and physical health." Ms. Johnson closed her folder. "Mrs. Thompson, based on our conversation and the documentation I've reviewed, I see no evidence that you're at risk or need intervention. I'll be closing this case." After she left, Mrs. Rodriguez and I sat quietly for several minutes. "Sandra," she said eventually, "this is going to continue escalating. Jake and Emma are spending money they don't have to hire professionals to try to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they're getting desperate?" "Yes." "Exactly. But it also means they're willing to go to extreme lengths. What else can they do? They could file a formal incompetency lawsuit. It's expensive and difficult to win, but if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, they could potentially get a guardian appointed." The thought terrified me. That would mean they could control my money. "They could try, but we have solid evidence that you're completely competent and that their motives are financial, not genuine concern for your welfare." That afternoon, I called Rose to share what had happened. "Sister," she said after hearing my story, "do you see how far they're willing to go for money? They're destroying family relationships, spending money on lawyers and investigators, ruining their own reputation, all to get access to your bank account again." Her words made me think deeply. Jake and Emma had completely revealed their true characters. There was no going back from this point. There was no possibility of a genuine reconciliation because I now understood that to them, I had never been a beloved mother and respected mother-in-law. I had always been just money in human form. This realization, though painful, was also liberating. I no longer had to wonder if I was making the right decision. I no longer had to feel guilty about protecting myself. They had proven beyond doubt that my emotional and physical well-being meant less to them than my bank balance. That evening, Margaret came over with a surprise. She had invited her book club friends to meet me. "Sandra," she introduced me. "These are my friends Janet, who you met at the salon, Linda, Carmen, and Ruth. We've all dealt with similar situations involving manipulative family members." We spent the evening sharing experiences. Linda had to establish boundaries with a sister who constantly borrowed money. Carmen had ended her relationship with a daughter who only called when she needed financial help. Ruth had to change her will after discovering her grandchildren saw her as their retirement fund. "What hurts me most," I admitted, "isn't losing the money I gave them. It's realizing that I never actually had the love I thought I had." "Sandra," Ruth said with the wisdom of her 78 years, "genuine love can't be purchased or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real love." Her words were healing balm for my wounded heart. She was absolutely right. I had been buying attention, not receiving love. I had been financing an illusion of family closeness. "You know what I've discovered," I said to my new friends. "Being alone with people who don't love you is much worse than being alone by yourself. At least when I'm by myself now, I'm in good company." Everyone laughed and we raised our teacups in a toast to our hard-earned wisdom. That night, after my friends left, I sat in my back garden looking up at the stars. They seemed brighter than usual, or maybe I was seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely financially independent. I had no obligations, no debts to ungrateful people, no one depending on my money except myself. Instead of frightening me, this reality excited me tremendously. I could travel wherever I wanted to go. I could redecorate my house exactly how I liked it. I could buy myself beautiful clothes. I could donate to charities that meant something to me. I could invest in my own future instead of funding the present of people who didn't appreciate me. Freedom tasted like possibility, and for the first time in years, I was eager to plan my future. 6 weeks after the social worker's visit, I thought I had finally won the battle. I had settled into a wonderful new routine. Peaceful breakfasts while reading the morning paper, tending my flower garden, having lunch with Margaret or my book club friends. In the afternoons, I devoted time to activities I had abandoned years ago. I had started painting watercolors again, something I loved before I became Jake and Emma's personal finance department. But on a Tuesday morning, while I was painting roses at my new easel, Mrs. Rodriguez came to my house with a serious expression that made my stomach drop. "Sandra, we need to discuss something important. Jake and Emma have filed a formal lawsuit for mental incompetency in family court. They're requesting that a legal guardian be appointed to manage your affairs." The words hit me like physical blows. I knew it was possible, but hearing it spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real. "Does this mean they can take control of my money?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "If a judge determines that you're unable to manage your own affairs, yes, they could appoint Jake as your legal guardian, giving him complete control over your finances." I sank into my favorite chair, feeling the weight of the deepest betrayal I had ever experienced. My own son was trying to have me legally declared incompetent so he could steal my money. "Mrs. Rodriguez, what evidence could they possibly have? You've seen that I'm completely capable of managing my life. They have statements from 3 witnesses claiming you've behaved erratically. They also submitted medical bills they claim you haven't paid and medications they say you've been hoarding without taking. But that's completely false. I don't have any unpaid medical bills, and I don't hoard medications." "I know, Sandra, but they've created convincing fake evidence. They also have a statement from Dr. Peterson claiming that you refused to cooperate with a psychiatric evaluation, which they're interpreting as proof of mental decline. The manipulation was diabolical. They had twisted my refusal to submit to an unnecessary examination into evidence of mental illness. They had used my instinct for self-protection as proof that I needed protection from myself. Who are the three witnesses? Yes. Mrs. Rodriguez consulted her documents. Emma, obviously. A neighbor named Mr. Collins. And someone claiming to be your pharmacist, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Collins was the unfriendly man who lived 2 streets over. We'd had conflicts because my friends sometimes parked near his driveway. Mr. Anderson was indeed my pharmacist, but I couldn't understand what complaint he could have against me. I need to speak with Mr. Anderson immediately, I told Mrs. Rodriguez. Something isn't right about this. We drove to the pharmacy that afternoon. Mr. Anderson looked nervous and surprised when he saw me. Mrs. Thompson, how nice to see you. How are you feeling? I'm fine, Mr. Anderson. I was told you signed a statement saying I show concerning behavior with my medications. His face turned bright red. Mrs. Thompson, your daughter-in-law visited a few weeks ago asking about your prescriptions. She said she was worried because you'd been acting strangely lately. What did you tell her? Yes. I explained that you only purchase vitamins and occasional pain relievers, that you don't have any regular prescription medications. But she insisted this was evidence that you weren't taking proper care of your health. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward. Mr. Anderson, did you sign any documents? She brought a paper that said I was confirming Mrs. Thompson had irregular medication purchasing patterns. I thought it was for insurance purposes or something medical. I had no idea it was for a court case. My own pharmacist had been deceived into signing something he didn't understand. Emma's manipulation knew no limits. Mr. Anderson, I said, I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I have no medication issues whatsoever. Of course, Mrs. Thompson. I'm deeply sorry for this misunderstanding. After leaving the pharmacy, we went to confront Mr. Collins. When we knocked on his door, he greeted us with obvious hostility. What do you people want? He demanded rudely. Mrs. Rodriguez replied professionally. I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. That's right, I did, he said smugly. That woman has been acting crazy for weeks now. Can you be specific about the behaviors you observed? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. Installing security cameras like she's living in a war zone, having strangers visiting constantly, screaming at her own family in the street. I realized Mr. Collins had misinterpreted everything completely. The cameras were for protection from Jake and Emma's invasions. The strangers were my supportive new friends. The screaming was me defending my home from harassment. Mr. Collins, I said, do you know why I installed those security cameras? No, and I don't care, he replied coldly. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law who broke into my house without permission and threatened me legally. That's exactly what a crazy person would say, he responded cruelly. There was no reasoning with him. His statement was based on superficial observations twisted into malicious interpretations. That evening, Mrs. Rodriguez and I planned our defense strategy. Sandra, we need our own psychiatric evaluation. I have a colleague, Dr. Martinez, who specializes in assessing mental capacity in elderly clients. She can provide official confirmation that you're completely competent. What if Jake and Emma have somehow influenced the judge? What if none of our evidence matters because the decision has already been made? Sandra, the legal system isn't perfect, but it's not entirely corrupt either. We have solid proof of your mental competence and clear evidence of their financial motivations. We're going to fight this and win. The next day, I went to my appointment with Dr. Martinez. She was a compassionate woman in her 50s with intelligent, kind eyes. Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to ask you various questions and conduct some tests to evaluate your mental capacity. Take your time with everything and answer as honestly as you can. For 2.5 hours, she questioned me about my memory, reasoning abilities, financial understanding, and emotional health. She also administered cognitive tests and asked me to solve mathematical and logical problems. Mrs. Thompson, she said when we finished, your results are significantly above average for your age group. You're not only mentally competent, your cognitive function is excellent. Doctor, I asked, why do you think my family is doing this to me? Based on your account and the documentation I've reviewed, this appears to be a textbook case of elder financial exploitation. Unfortunately, it's much more common than most people realize. I left the appointment feeling validated but also deeply saddened. The professional confirmation of my mental health was reassuring, but it also confirmed that this lawsuit was real and I needed to take it seriously. That afternoon, Margaret organized an emergency meeting with all our book club friends. When I told them about the incompetency lawsuit, everyone was outraged. Sandra, Linda said firmly, we'll all testify on your behalf. We've spent time with you for weeks, and anyone can see that you're sharper and stronger than most people half your age. Absolutely, Janet added. You're clearer and more decisive than many 40-year-old women I know. Ruth, with her 78 years of wisdom, took my hands gently. Sandra, my dear, what your children are attempting is nothing new. For centuries, greedy children have tried to have their parents declared insane to access their money. But you have something many of those victims didn't have: comprehensive documentation, skilled legal representation, and friends who can testify to your competence. Her words filled me with hope. I wasn't fighting this battle alone. I had an army of strong, intelligent women who had witnessed my transformation firsthand. You know what's most heartbreaking about this whole situation? Said. Jake and Emma are willing to destroy any possibility of future reconciliation for money. Even if I were willing to forgive everything that's happened so far, there's no coming back from this level of betrayal. Maybe that's actually for the best, Janet replied thoughtfully. At least now you know exactly who they really are, and you can make decisions based on that truth. That night, for the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to truly grieve. Not from sadness but from loss. I said my final goodbye to the son I thought I had raised, to the dream of a loving family, to the fantasy that my unconditional love had been reciprocated. But something new also emerged from that grief. An iron determination not to let them strip away not only my money, but also my dignity and my freedom. The war had been officially declared, and I was prepared to fight with everything I had. The trial was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I woke early that morning, put on my best navy blue suit, and looked at myself in the mirror with a determination I had never felt before. Today wasn't just about my mental capacity being evaluated. It was about my dignity as a human being, my right to live free from abuse, and my value as more than just a source of income. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at 7 in the morning to review our strategy one final time. Sandra, remember that the burden of proof lies with them. They must prove that you're incompetent. We just need to demonstrate that you're not. What if the judge is already biased against me? Judge Wilson has a reputation for fairness. I've researched her previous cases, and she doesn't automatically favor family members. She's committed to protecting elderly people's rights. We arrived at the courthouse at 9 in the morning. In the hallway, I saw Jake wearing a new dark suit he probably purchased for this occasion, and Emma dressed in black like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was the funeral of our family relationship. When our eyes met, Jake looked away quickly, but Emma stared at me with a coldness that confirmed this was purely a business transaction for her. Their attorney was a distinguished older man with the kind of confidence that comes from winning similar cases before. When he began his opening statement, his strategy became immediately clear: to portray me as a confused elderly woman who had been manipulated by outsiders into alienating myself from my loving family. Your Honor, he said in a solemn, practiced voice, Mrs. Sandra Thompson has demonstrated clear mental deterioration in recent months. She has abruptly terminated all financial assistance to her family without rational explanation. She has installed unnecessary security systems due to paranoid thinking, and she has isolated herself from her loved ones under the influence of neighbors and attorneys who are obviously exploiting her vulnerable condition. Every word had been carefully selected to make my newfound independence sound like dementia and my freedom sound like manipulation by strangers. Then they began calling their witnesses. Emma was first to testify, and her performance was worthy of an Academy Award. She cried as she described how I had completely changed personality, become hostile and paranoid, and cut myself off from the family that cherished me. "Your Honor," she said through convincing tears, "Sandra has always been like a mother to me. Watching her mental decline has been absolutely heartbreaking. We just want to ensure she gets the care and protection she needs." Lies wrapped in persuasive tears and delivered with perfect emotion. When Mrs. Rodriguez cross-examined her, the cracks in her story began to show clearly. "Mrs. Brooks, can you tell the court the last time you contacted my client without requesting money?" Emma hesitated. "Well, we discussed many different topics during our conversations. Can you give me a specific date?" "I don't recall exact dates. Is it true that you and your husband married without inviting my client?" "It was a very intimate ceremony." "Is it true that when my client asked about your wedding, you told her you had only invited close family?" Emma's face flushed red. Those words were taken out of their proper context. What would be the appropriate context for telling your mother-in-law that she isn't close family? She couldn't provide a convincing answer. Jake was called next. Seeing him on the witness stand, swearing to tell the truth while preparing to lie about my mental health, was one of the most painful experiences of my entire life. This was the boy I had raised alone after his father died, the child I had sacrificed everything for. "My mom has always been extremely generous with us," he testified. "But recently, she's become unpredictable and irrational. We believe she's being manipulated by people who are taking advantage of her condition." When Mrs. Rodriguez cross-examined him, his mask slipped completely. "Mr. Thompson, how much money have you received from your mother over the past 2 years?" "I don't know the precise amount. Does $15,000 sound approximately correct?" "Maybe." "She's always been generous. How many times have you visited your mother without asking her for financial assistance?" The silence was deafening. "Is it true that you and your wife entered my client's home without permission and examined her private documents? We were concerned about her well-being. Is it true that you brought an attorney to pressure her into signing a power of attorney? We wanted to help her manage her finances better. Do you, at 32 years old, require financial assistance from your 71-year-old mother to pay basic living expenses?" Jake couldn't answer with any dignity and tact. Mr. Collins testified about my supposedly erratic behaviors, but when Mrs. Rodriguez pressed him for specifics, he admitted he had never actually spoken with me directly, and that all his information came from superficial observations. Dr. Peterson testified that my refusal to undergo his evaluation proved mental decline, but Mrs. Rodriguez presented documentation from our evaluation with Dr. Martinez, which completely contradicted his conclusions. Then it was our turn to present our case. Mrs. Rodriguez first called Mr. Anderson, my pharmacist, who explained how he had been tricked into signing a misleading statement about my medication habits. Dr. Martinez testified about my excellent mental condition and presented the results of cognitive tests that had been flawless. Mr. Garcia from the hardware store testified about my mental competence and explained that my decisions to change locks and install security were completely rational responses to harassment. Margaret and my book club friends testified about my clarity, my renewed energy, and my ability to maintain healthy social relationships with new people. Finally, it was my turn to testify. I stood up with dignity and walked to the witness stand, feeling the weight of 71 years of experience, of wisdom earned through pain, of strength discovered through adversity. Mrs. Rodriguez guided me through my testimony, allowing me to tell my complete story. The $15,000 spent over 2 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the constant emotional manipulation, the violation of my privacy, the legal threats from people who claimed to love me. "Mrs. Thompson," Mrs. Rodriguez finally asked, "why did you decide to stop providing financial support to your son and daughter-in-law?" "Because I finally understood that what I was receiving from them wasn't love," I replied in a clear, strong voice that filled the courtroom. "It was a business arrangement disguised as a family relationship. My money was welcome in their lives, but I as a person was not. Do you have any regrets about your decision?" My only regret is that it took me so long to recognize the truth and protect myself. Jake's lawyer tried to make me appear confused during his cross-examination, but I answered every single question with clarity and precision. When he attempted to suggest that my new friendships had manipulated me, I explained that for the first time in years, I had relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation. In his closing argument, Jake's lawyer insisted that I was a victim of outside manipulation. Mrs. Rodriguez's response was devastating. Your Honor, what we've witnessed here is not the case of an incompetent elderly woman, but of a woman who has finally found the courage to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs have presented no credible medical evidence of mental incompetence. What they have presented is frustration and anger because their source of income has decided to exercise her legal and moral right to protect her own financial resources. Judge Wilson retired to deliberate for 2 hours that felt like 2 eternities. When she returned, her expression was serious but decisive. After carefully reviewing all evidence presented to this court, she began. It is clear that Mrs. Sandra Thompson is in complete possession of her mental faculties. Professional psychiatric evaluation confirms her cognitive competence. Her financial decisions, while painful for her family members, are entirely rational and within her legal rights. My heart began beating faster with hope. Furthermore, the judge continued, the evidence strongly suggests that this lawsuit is motivated by financial gain rather than genuine concern for Mrs. Thompson's well-being. This court completely denies the request for guardianship. I had won. I had not only won the lawsuit, I had won back my freedom, my dignity, and my right to live without abuse from people who supposedly loved me. As we left the courthouse, I saw Jake and Emma talking angrily with their lawyer in the parking lot. Emma shot me a look of pure hatred before storming away. Jake glanced at me one final time, and for just a moment, I thought I saw something that might have been regret in his eyes. But it was far too late for regrets. That night, Margaret organized a celebration at my house with all our friends from the book club. We toasted to justice, to freedom, and to the sisterhood of strong women who support each other through difficult times. Sandra, Ruth told me, raising her teacup high, today you didn't just win a court case. You won back your entire life. She was absolutely right. For the first time in years, my future belonged completely to me. I could travel to places I'd always dreamed of seeing. I could love without conditions or expectations. I could create art and beauty. I could live without fear, without guilt, and without manipulation. 4 months later, I sold my house and moved to a beautiful apartment downtown near the Arts District. I donated half of my savings to organizations that help protect elderly people from family financial abuse. With the remaining money, I began living the life I had always wanted but never allowed myself to have. I traveled through New England during fall foliage season, took watercolor painting classes, and joined volunteer groups at the local library. I never heard from Jake and Emma again. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned they had to move to a smaller apartment and that Emma had gotten her first job in years. Perhaps financial hardship would teach them lessons that my generosity never could. The value of honest work and true independence. Some evenings, when I look at the stars from my new apartment balcony, I think about the woman I was just 1 year ago. Fearful, manipulated, believing I had to purchase love with money. That woman no longer exists. In her place stands someone who has learned a fundamental truth about life. Genuine love never has a price tag, and personal freedom is never too expensive to fight for. My name is Sandra Thompson. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I need to love and protect is myself. If this story touched your heart, please consider supporting JNR Voices by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more real-life stories like this one. Your support helps us continue sharing these important experiences that remind us all about the power of standing up for ourselves and finding strength we didn't know we had. What would you do if you were in Sandra's situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. I'm always curious about your perspectives, and please let me know where you first heard about this story. For more inspiring life stories that will make you think and feel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. There are many other powerful stories waiting for you on our channel. Each one a reminder that we all have more strength inside us than we realize. Sometimes life puts us in situations where we have to choose between being liked and being respected, between keeping peace and keeping our dignity. Sandra's story shows us that it's never too late to choose ourselves, to set boundaries, and to demand the respect we deserve. Whether you're dealing with family members who take advantage of your generosity, friends who only call when they need something, or